This session is aimed principally at our partners and future partners to tell you a little bit about men's sheds and what's involved. If we could move to in Chris Whitty style, if we could move to the next one. We will touch on a number of areas. We will talk about what is a men's shed, UK Men's Sheds Association and what we do, and then when we chat to Rob and to Johnny, we'll talk about what they do in their different areas. So Johnny's involved in a couple of networks, regional networks, and Rob is with Men's Sheds Cymru in Wales. And if we go to the next slide, please. And to the next slide. So there's a page of woe, and the page of woe is some of the challenges that we're seeing in the world at the moment, particularly, or in the UK, particularly around men and loneliness. And 76% of suicides are with men who have rather than women. So men are more likely to end their lives through suicide. There's increased unemployment, particularly hitting men through COVID-19, and men were twice as likely to die from COVID at the height of the epidemic than women were. Also that we have over 1 million people in the UK saying that loneliness, they don't speak to people for over a month. They go without talking to friends or to neighbours or anybody in their family, and 41% of people feel lonely each day, each week, sorry. So if we could go to the next slide. So what is a men's shed? Men's sheds are a number of things, and we talk about the characteristics. And sheds are one option. They are one solution. Now, we think that they're the best solution. And when we look at our statistics later, you'll see why we feel that. But sheds are about friendships. They're inclusive environments. They work in the community. They're part of the community. They're about making and doing. They're safe environments for men to do stuff, to make stuff or fix stuff or repurpose. And they're all autonomous. This is really important. They're all autonomous from UK Men's Sheds Association. And as a result, they are all very different. And we see regional differences, and we see differences across the one shed that's next door to the next. Okay, if we could go to the next one, please. And so sheds make all sorts of things. They do carving, they make trinkets, they make puppets, as you can see there from Men's Sheds Cymru, one of the puppets that they've made, and they make a variety of other things as well. If we could just click, they make coracles. Coracles are those inverted domes or dishes that people like to go in, 3,000-year-old boats. They make bird boxes. They make and fix furniture. Lots and lots of Christmas decorations at Christmas. You'll see men's sheds in the markets. And one of the big things that sheds do is turning, and you'll over 25,000 now bowls or trinkets are made every year on lathes through men's sheds. Okay, if we could go to the next slide, please. So we did a questionnaire. We then did some surveys, some specific surveys with a number of sheds, and we had over 500 recipients. And that gave us quite a lot of data. And if we turn the page, please, we've got over 600 open sheds in the United Kingdom, and 150 additional ones in development. And that's been a steady number in development. So as new sheds open, and we had sheds opening over COVID as well, some virtual sheds, as new sheds open, we see the number of development sheds increasing as well, which is a real positive thing for us all. And we see sheds in places like workshops, like the one from Milton Keynes that we just saw. We see them in community centres. We also have a shed in a bus. And there's also sheds in disused mortuaries. And I emphasise the word disused. Then we click to the next one, please. And if we estimate that there's probably 25 people, and these are conservative estimates in every shed, some sheds have over 100, we then see the impact that they have in a number of areas, whether that's making things for schools or for local charities. There are sheds that have kitted out charity warehouses. They make mud kitchens for schools and sensory areas. They make things for the family. And they also do projects in the community. And whether that's picking up litter or painting fences or fixing things for the local community, they have a massive reach. And those 25 people that go into the shed probably have a positive impact on tens of thousands in their communities when you start adding up the people in schools and the people in the community using different facilities. If we can go to the next slide, please. The average age, over 90% of shedders, when this was taken a couple of years ago, were over the age of 50, with 63% of those over the age of 65. And just to highlight that that's a hard to reach group as far as people in local authorities find in terms of reaching people in the community, particularly men, because a lot of activities are geared up more to women or to couples. And so men really don't have that space to go somewhere other than, say, the pub or to the sports ground to watch some sport. And if we go to the next slide, sheds are open over 200,000 hours every year. That's over 2 million shedder hours. And the study we did showed that over 1 million cups of tea were drank every year. So if anybody's there listening from PG Tips, please come and sponsor Men's Sheds, or from Yorkshire Tea. All brands are accepted, particularly Twinings, Lapsang Souchong. And we also found that that there's over a million toilet stops a year as well with shedders, and probably closer to 2 with all the tea they're drinking. And there are also Welsh tea companies as well, the Welsh Tea Company, I've just been told. If we go to the next slide, the survey showed us that 88% of shedders felt more connected with the community, 34% were happier, and 97% made new friends. We still have 3% that don't want to make new friends, but I think that's an incredible number when you're talking about men, and I include myself in this very much, that we don't really like to make those new connections as much as women perhaps, and there's some science around that and quite a bit of research. So 97% making new friends is incredible. And here's the magic on the next slide. We found that attending a shed, from those that answered saying they were depressed or anxious before they joined a shed or lonely, 89% said that the shed brought a reduction in depression, 75% a reduction in anxiety, and 96% said that they felt less lonely. And that's better than any pill, I think, that you could take on the market. So the power of the shed, the impact of the shed, and shedders around this country are making a marked difference and transformation on people's lives, which is incredible. So why do sheds work, if we move to the next slide? The shed allows people to make something for themselves, for their family or for their community, or even for a charity. The process of making gives the shedder a focus, a tremendous sense of achievement and self-worth. They've created or solved a problem, and it is like the Maslow hierarchy needs. It's about self-esteem and giving yourself that recognition, recognizing that you've achieved something. It's a safe environment. We always promote men's sessions, but women very often join sheds as well and go to those sheds. So men talk shoulder to shoulder. That's one of the sayings that came out of Australia, and where the shed movement, as it is today, came from. And I'll use a little analogy of why sheds work for men. So if you put 12 men into a room, or minions, and said, talk about your feelings, what you'd find is 6 would leave the room immediately, 4, and the rest of them would try to find the corners of the room. And of course, not being as bright as we might be as men, there are only 4 corners in this room, and the other 2 are really struggling. However, if you put a lawnmower into the room and you say, fix it, within an hour, everybody will know each other's names. They'll be having full conversations. They'll know how they take their tea or their coffee. And they'll also know how many children they've got, how many grandchildren, and what ails them. And you may, if you're very lucky, get a fixed lawnmower. It's not always the case, but you may get a fixed lawnmower. So that's how the shed works. It gives a sense of purpose. It gives that focus. And if we go to the shedder journey on the next slide, we can look at the sorry, yes, we can look at some of the challenges, which is, you know, loneliness in this world, suicide, mental health problems, physical health problems, people just not having something to do, which can bring on anxiety. If we just click forwards, then we see that the shed can bring companionship, friendship, a purpose, self-worth, that feeling of having made something. And that creates a number of impacts on that person's life. It makes them healthier, happier, more productive, more connected with the community, more connected to themselves, to their families. And you might have something that's very useful, that you actually need. So we're looking for partnerships with government, with third sector, with education, with private companies. And we're looking at that on a national level, but we're also trying to encourage that on a local level. And then we do our work, which is enabled by our members, first and foremost, and the volunteers from our members. We have shed ambassadors that go out and are there to support people if they want to set up a shed. We have shed leaders, those people that have set up the sheds or are running their sheds. And we also have our sponsors and our donors, of which we are very grateful for. And if we can move to the next slide, please. I just want to touch on what we're doing as UK Men's Sheds Association. And we are something for everybody. We're not everything for everybody. We can't solve all the woes in sheds and make sheds come everywhere. But we do have some ambitious targets. And these are some of the areas that we're working in or that we intend to work in the coming year and going forwards. We're looking to launch a campaign around well-being in craft and DIY. And that's us trying to help reduce the number of people in contemplating suicide and encouraging them to come along to a shed and to get a new lease of life. Or just if you're having a bad day, come and see the shed. So we're going to try and campaign around that to make the world and the country a better place. Michael Jackson said that. We're looking to grow the number of shed volunteers, we're looking to grow the number of sheds, and support sheds as much as we possibly can, and the experience of every shedder. If we can click on to the next slide. So we have a strategy, and if we go to the next slide, you know, sheds are very much the therapy that dare not speak its name, and our vision is for healthy and happy men. And so we want to create, there's lots of information on this slide, but it will be available for people afterwards. But we want to inspire and enable sheds to grow across the UK to improve men's health. And that's a shed in every place that needs one, for every man or woman that needs a shed. If we click to the next one, please. And we will deliver this through a strong organisation in the UK, working with partners across the UK. And if we click to the next one, please. And we base all of what we're doing in insight. So we're insight-led. So we listen to what the sheds are asking, we look at what they're saying to us, and that's formed this strategy and how we're going to deliver this strategy. We are a voice of men's sheds, and our targets are 1,000 new sheds in the next 3 years. Sorry, 1,000 sheds open in the next 3 years, growing that to 2,500 sheds in the longer term, which we think is quite achievable. We want to increase our network of volunteers that are outreaching and talking to local authorities to 120. And we want to increase our support to sheds. And we've announced this week Tight Screw, which is the official screw of the UK Men's Sheds Association now. And they join organisations such as Triton Tools, Axminster Tools and Machinery, Smart Water, and a variety of other partners such as Ronseal in supporting the work that sheds do. And we have our support program as well, with our membership officer and administrator as well. So if we can click to the next one and to the one after that, please. So how we will do this, we will champion sheds to help grow them. We will promote. We're going to run these new initiatives, such as the campaigns that we're looking at, and continue to offer support and build our website so that we have more support and more resources for people looking to set up sheds and for those in sheds as well. And if we click to the next one, we're looking to help develop networks, and one of those networks, the network in Norfolk, We'll talk to Johnny about that and the impact that's having. And we're looking to also develop training programs to help shed leaders, help trustees, and to help workshop supervisors as well, and to also help try and recruit more people so that we get more expertise into what we're doing. And if we click to the next one, we provide a first-stop shop. If we don't know the answer, and very often we don't, we will hopefully know where to go to. And so we're developing more resources around health and well-being as well with our health and well-being group. And we have a video that we've been playing on that. And so they're developing questions and answers so that if somebody's worried about somebody with dementia in the shed or struggling with asthma or bereavement, we're trying to develop resources and connections so that we can help shedders in that way. And then, as I said earlier, there's the members' benefits as well. Okay, if we click to the next slide, please. And then the voice. We want to engage more. We think together we can engage a lot more people. And the Ron Seal video that hopefully you've all seen, it's on our website, it's on our YouTube channel. It has been viewed by, I think, over 1.5 million people on YouTube, on Channel 4, which is the most successful video film of its kind that Ron Seal and Channel 4 has ever produced. And that's fantastic for men's sheds because it talks about what we do in a real life context of how it changes people's lives. And together we can do that and get the voice of men's sheds out so that men's sheds can be men's sheds can be a household name in the same way, or better still, than the WI. Not that the WI does anything wrong, but we're better than them because we can be. Next slide, please. So we deliver this through our committees and specialists. We have the ambassadors and partners as well. So we can't achieve it on our own. We're a small team of 5-6 staff members. And so working with partners such as the Royal Voluntary Service allows us to get that greater reach. And again, we're looking to try and develop those more. And of course, we have the sheds, and they are a wealth of knowledge. And every time we need something, we can go to a shed, and they're always happy to help because they want to spread that magic dust of what the shed is, that golden spirit of the shed. If we could click to the next one, please. And so this is just a list of some of the partners that we work with: the Zero Suicide Alliance, the Men's Health Forum, Royal Voluntary Service, Prostate Cancer UK, some of our funders, the people that we work with to varying levels in the home countries as well, and of course our sponsors there. We've Screwtight on that list now, and we hope to announce yet another partner with discounts for sheds next week. If we can click to the next slide. I'm nearly finished, I promise. So if you are with a local authority or a church, or if you're with an allotment organisation or with a hospital, and we have sheds in hospitals as well, you can get involved in a number of ways. A very simple way is to signpost people to sheds. You could offer direct support to meet the gaps in society and the gaps that you might be seeing in your provision that you provide. You could be a partner, embedding sheds into your strategic aims as an organisation, and so that we're part of your solutions and your values, and we share your values, so that you can benefit from being involved in sheds, and sheds can certainly benefit from being involved with you. Click to the next slide, please. You could start a new shed. We are there to help you start new sheds. There's a lot of people out there with the experience, and 2 of them will be coming on in a moment, who will be a lot more animated than me. And they can talk to you about how to start a new shed. So can the ambassadors. You could have property. You might have something that you're paying rates on, and actually putting a men's shed in there could reduce those rates. Or if you're a landlord, local authority, you could remove those rates completely for the sheds. And sheds are always looking for somewhere to be. So you are not alone. We are there to support you. And please come and support us as UK Men's Sheds, and as the different organisations such as Men's Sheds come with as well, please. And finally, it's not just property we're looking for. You may have some services that you could lend, some knowledge, some experience. You may have product, or you may be able to help financially, or financially for the shed. And the sheds don't just want things for nothing as well. if people want to go and do wood turning courses or want to go and learn how to use some of the skills or have a guest speaker, the sheds are happy to do those things in general. Again, they're autonomous. I can't speak on behalf of all of them, but I do see a spirit in all sheds where they want to get that name out. It's infectious coming to a shed, and they want to spread that. And there's a lot of things that could be a symbiotic relationship with your organisations. So if we could now get the guests back into the studio, and we'll have a discussion, and please send in your questions to us. We could lose the slide now. Hello, Johnny. That looks like a better signal.
Hello. Are we all in the same time zone now?
We are.
I think this is Norfolk Mean Time over here. Yeah.
So I was watching a slide earlier. Is Norfolk in the north or is it in the south?
We are the east.
You're the east?
The east. Norfolk and Suffolk, absolutely the east, yeah.
So you've sidestepped the argument.
None of this north and southern stuff here. No, we are proudly the east of England, yeah.
And Wales, you're Wales.
We'll be west. We'll be west or Wales.
Oh, we might get an east-west fight going on there. Oh. Some rivalry.
Absolutely, yeah. The Battle of Birmingham.
Which is where I'm from.
Oh, you can keep it.
You're the thorn between two roses, then, Charlie.
Well, I'm living in Nottingham, but that still puts me in the middle. Yes. Hang on a minute, thorn. No, thank you for joining us this morning. If people do have any questions, please send them through, and they'll come up onto the screen. Rob, you're Men's Sheds Cymru, or you're not personally Men's Sheds Cymru, but you work with Men's Sheds Cymru. What are the benefits that you see for partners with sheds?
We actually, what I've seen in my shedding journey, my history with sheds, is partners come to sheds because that's when they want to engage with men, and particularly, as you said in your slides, those men over 65. Hard to engage with, or difficult to get them to come forward by themselves to take part in, as a public health service or some kind of well-being message. So I've seen a lot of partners come to a shed and say, "Oh, Men's Shed, this sounds really interesting. Tell me more, and can we come to you with our message?" I think that's where I've seen. That's where partners can really benefit. If someone, I've seen people put on perhaps a health talk where they want, where they particularly want men to come along, and they'll put it on in perhaps their offices or in a sort of hotel type conference. We all know the type of thing I'm talking about. And then they find that the men actually don't really go, whereas I think they get much better engagement if they go to the men, and that place is the shed. Like on the slides, like we all know, sheds are safe, fun places, where the guys like going, where they're in control. So, for partners to engage with those groups of older men, go to the shed, go to the men at the shed, and they'll readily listen to that message.
Yeah. And Johnny, you work with a lot of partners. In fact, you're based in a partner. You're
two partners, yeah.
Two partners, yes. You're very east. What is it they get out of it, and those that you're working with?
I think one of the things, just to add first to what Rob has said, one of the benefits I think sheds bring as well, and particularly if you are, say, because I work with two infrastructure organisations, one in Norfolk, one in Suffolk, and one of the things I think an established shed brings about as well is, I would say, it has a hinterland. It's not just the shed, and I often find when people come to talk to sheds, they recognise the benefit of the shed's own place in its community. When I look at some of our sheds, it will often be the case, for instance, that, you were talking in your presentation about sheds in churches, sheds in other things. We've got one or two sheds, say, in museums, and you might well have the case that the chaps are in the shed, and possibly their wives are helping run the museums. Their families are connected. So I think sheds are often a really good first port of call for someone who wants a partnership, because as well as the shed being a dynamic place where, you know, a lot of all sorts of different things can happen, sheds tend to be increasingly well connected. I mean, I know, you know, sheds across Norfolk and Suffolk that maybe are well connected into, say, their local good neighbour schemes. That so in a sense, when we're talking to partners, you know, we have the shed, but we always remember, you know, the shed ultimately is its people and the people it's connected to as well. So, you know, it's not just thinking about some sort of inanimate thing that partners want to link with. It's all the relationships that exist within that shed, all the relationships that already exist from the shed out into the community. And sheds have proved really, really effective ways of sometimes breaking down barriers into communities. And that's attractive to partner organisations.
Yeah, we had, it was a housing association, a little like Havant Cymru, where the Welsh programme's been delivered through, and they were talking to us about trying to reduce evictions in their housing association, and they couldn't get through to the men, and so they felt that a men's shed, setting a men's shed up for their community, would work. So they're working on that project at the moment and trying to connect locally. So it's trying to solve some of the problems in society through a positive way, rather than evicting somebody, for instance.
The other thing I might add is, I say, people have recognised that sheds have made some real progress in areas where others can't. I mean, you know, it's a familiar story how difficult it is to get a man to go to a doctor, and that's well known. And we know that, you know, sheds have been really important in sometimes gently easing men that way, particularly if there is a problem. But an interesting one that we're having a discussion with in Norfolk at the moment is about an organisation that provides free legal advice. Now, probably trying to get a man to go to a lawyer is nearly as difficult as getting a man to go to a doctor. But for example, over lockdown, all sorts of very difficult things have happened to people who may well find their way into sheds. And very often men are not great at asking in the first place where they're going to find stuff, you know, and if you can actually present that into the shed and suddenly say, well, okay, well, here's some help for you, then, you know, that's good for the partner organisation. But of course, it's terribly good for our members as well, because they might not be aware of some of the services that are available to them until someone comes into the shed and says, and you could look at this. And, you know, that's what we're hoping to try and certainly get around Norfolk and in different ways in Suffolk as well, you know, so that we are a bridge between, you know, some of the potential partners and the services they offer, and of course the communities, our members in their communities.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And, I mean, Rob, we've got some questions that we'll get up as well, and that's an important one. Yes, about research, and Ken was commenting about, you know, he knows why sheds work, but it's good to see some of the stats behind it. From our perspective, you know, we think we have to evidence that. We have to show that, because if somebody's going to invest, they want some return for that investment. But particularly in the UK, what we try not to do, or our viewpoint, is not to put the onus on sheds then to be reporting on their successes, because it just becomes a form-filling exercise, and that's not what people go to the sheds for. But we're trying to do some light touch research around the country so that we can evidence that. So somebody will give funding because we deliver that, not because I give you X to deliver Y and Z. It's actually, we know you'll deliver Y and Z. Here's some of the funding, which is a difficult environment to be in, I think. And Rob, you get quite a bit of lottery funding. How do you manage that target piece with the lottery?
Yeah, well, yes. Unfortunately, our lottery funding ended at the end of last year, but you know, they were really good partners. They, you know, our liaison officer clearly sees those benefits. You know, you just need to take someone to a shed, and for them to experience a shed, to see what, you know, what their funding is delivering. You know, it's quite obvious. And you know, I'm often asked, you know, come and do a presentation about sheds, Rob. Come and talk to us about sheds. I said, actually, it'd be better if you came to a shed and just experience it, because you really get it when you're there. And you know, the men are often very good at articulating why they go to the shed and what they get out of it.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, and one of the things we talk about is men don't talk about their challenges or their problems, but actually, you go into a shed, you can't shut a lot of them up. It's the environment. Typical running costs of a shed from Josh. It varies very much. I mean, it's if you take the rent out of it, a lot of sheds will run on £3,000 ish. But then we see in some of the reports we see, but then we see that the rent can be as much as, you know, some sheds are paying £10,000 a year. Others are paying £1 a year if they're based in a railway. I mean, what's it like in Norfolk? What are the sort of ranges there, and in Suffolk as well?
Well, it depends really what's, I mean, again, like you say, there's every shed as such is a bit different, and often will have different, you know, there's quite a few sheds run on peppercorn rents. Obviously, the downside of that tends to be security of tenure, which I think is a big problem for sheds nationwide. I mean, I would quote my colleague and our mutual friend Henry Gowman. I mean, his shed, I know he said I think he can run it on a little more than £1,000 a year, but that depends. I think that's on grants. You know, what they do is your sheds obviously can bring in some income depending on what they are, you know, what they're making, what their relationships are. You know, there is always that potential size shed. So, you know, in the sense where a shed is bringing money, most of our sheds are getting by on, there's quite a few local grants and quite a few have benefited from startup grants. You don't need a massive amount of money to get a shed up and running. And actually, probably the costs are a bit front loaded. So once you can set up and once you can maybe start making things that bring some income in and maybe taking on some work in your local area, that all helps bring a bit of income in. So, you know, again, like always, it depends on the rent. It depends on the arrangements. It depends also on, I mean, we found just lately with insurance costs vary. We've got some sheds that are built in nice modern brick buildings, and of course their insurance is really low. Some that are in wooden buildings, fine, you know, and particularly if you've got wooden buildings with machinery inside them, the insurers are going to go. So it's very difficult to generalize, but I think there are a good wide range of sources of income, particularly starting up sheds that then can get you on the road reasonably, you know, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's reasonably effective and reliable. Yeah.
Yeah, we ran there was a couple of sessions yesterday about sustainable income and grants, which was hopefully really useful. And there's a question there from Andrew Caldecott regarding the sponsors lists. Yes, the benefits are available through the UK Men's Sheds website through the members zone, but we do also have in the newsletter we regularly send out the grant making bodies and when they're making the grants and those that are available. So we try to do that. But where else? I mean, where else do sheds go, Rob? I mean, if you look on the Charities Commission, some sheds bring in 14,000 a year as their turnover, and maybe there's a benefit there of being a charity. Again, another session we ran. Where do you see most of the income coming from for your for the sheds in Wales?
I think it's just difficult to say where you know where the majority is. It's a complete mix. You know, whether it's small local grounds, some of the bigger sheds, perhaps with guys who you know, perhaps have a history of dealing with paperwork. We know how much paperwork requests involves doing that. And again, it depends on their running costs. You know, if you can get that sort of free property or free premises, you really don't need that much money to run the shed. And perhaps those sheds are getting by with either charging a small membership fee to their members or just selling what they make locally. Yeah. And then, of course, you know, if you've got a much bigger rent, then you do need, you know, I think it's difficult, you know, if you're paying £500 a month rent and you're a sort of fairly small shed, difficult to generate enough income through sales and membership. So it's a mix, I would say, actually. Yeah, it's a mix of sales, membership, and then small grant applications.
Yeah. And you know, you're saying that about sales just reminded me about partnerships and why they're so essential. We found there's a shed not far from me based in a church, and they sell a lot of, or they provide for their diocese a lot of holding crosses for a festival that they have every year. One of the other things that they do is they have a relationship with the local co-op, and that's continued from, first of all, it was a grant that was made, but every year they now still sell their 800 robins at the co-op, which is £800 for them. So, which is a nice Christmas gift for the shed. So, whilst they were recipients of a grant for 1 year, and a lot of the time you find that grant's over, so therefore that partnership then ends, they've continued that relationship in a non-evasive way for the co-op, and yet it's really positive for them as a shed. We have a here we go, Inverclyde shed. Just acquired a building with a 25-year lease for £1. That's excellent from the Scottish government there. And what we do see is the Scottish government very much involved with men's sheds and supporting them, which is a fantastic thing. Now, I did see a question that came up around insurance. Here it is, typical insurance premiums. Again, I think this varies greatly. We've looked as UKMSA for a single provider of insurance policies. I think the challenge is that it varies so much, and it depends on your shed, that there isn't a best fit for all. Some churches I know get free insurance. Some sheds get free insurance because they're linked to the church and they get the ecclesiastical insurance, and they see that as no more risk for one shed in particular. But I've also seen insurances for over £1,000 when they've been linked to local authority buildings. Is that the same in you've seen in Norfolk there and Suffolk?
I think one thing I would say that, I mean, we again, even just a microcosm across, I mean, I say particularly Norfolk here because I've only relatively recently started working in the Suffolk sheds, but it will probably be the same. One of the key things I think with insurance is particularly your choice of insurer, getting somebody who at least understands the shed concept, because I know that some sheds have sort of got out to the open market and not everybody gets us. I mean, there are some organisations who have quite a good track record with sheds, and I mean, certainly across the Norfolk network, I think we sort of share the information around as to who's been who's been really helpful or who's a good idea to talk to. Like we said earlier, a shed, because a shed could be made of any number of things, a brick shed, a modern brick. I mean, the guys over in North Walsham recently moved into new accommodation with a nice modern brick build, or I should say, which is an insurer's, paradise. So they've probably got quite a good price, but wooden sheds would get different. But I think the most important thing is when you're choosing your insurer, have a conversation with the insurer, make sure that it's an ongoing conversation. It's not just a once for all chat, keep them informed of developments in the shed. And as I say, I think, UKMSA recommends your local shed. If you have a shed network, there will be knowledge there about it. So if you're in the position of a shed looking for insurance, do ask around other sheds, because there's quite a lot of experience within the community as to who understands us, who gets it, maybe also who hasn't done, and maybe so check around. Most problems like that have usually been encountered by one of the other sheds, so hopefully we can share that information.
Yeah, and one of the things I've heard is just be aware if your quote is too low, because it might not be covering anything at all that you think you're getting. So question there about, has anybody looked at funding from trusts and charitable foundations? Yes. And this year we can't name them, but we did receive a grant from one charitable trust for just shy of £250,000, and that's funding our development staff. So Rachel, the volunteer and community development manager, and David Melly, who started yesterday with us, who's our partnership development manager. So yes, we do. We also get funding from the Mercers, which Johnny will know through the work in Norfolk. The Mercers, the Worshipful Company of Mercers, the Rain Foundation, the Tudor Trust, Goldsmiths. I should now name them all because Garfield and Weston, the Dulverton Trust as well, and all those other trusts that would like to give us some money as we're going to apply to them. So, so we do. Funding from charitable trusts does come with requirements. They're usually not free grants, so we do have to provide reporting on those. And it's, at the moment, we're not set up to give out grants to other organisations. We did have the ASDA Foundation. We worked with ASDA on doing some of that. But yes, we do. And We don't have a good spread of income coming to UK men's sheds. Most of it comes from charitable foundations, and we need to try and diversify that funding model so that we're less at risk. But we're very, very keen to still continue to receive that funding because they are very generous. And in Wales, you've been mainly the lottery, but also foundations as well.
Yes, and Moon Dance and Waterloo Foundation and small amount from Welsh Government. But similar to UK, heavily weighted towards, grants.
Tony's just made a really important point, and then followed up. Yes, COVID-19 has decimated many communities and people's lives, and employment, as there's been record employment in recent years because of it, and men's sheds really has a place to play in that in terms of the recovery of the UK. Are you seeing an increase in demand? Because we certainly did online. Are you seeing that in Suffolk and Norfolk?
Yeah, I mean, what we beginning to get now, and this is a debate I know it's going on, I think possibly is the focus of one of the later sessions later today. We're getting a lot of interest. We're certainly getting interest from people who'd like to join sheds directly, and people who go on forums and things like that. I mean, we've got one of our colleagues on the steering group sits on one of the local mental health forums, and he's constantly receiving questions about joining sheds and where they are and things like that. What we're also getting a very notable increase as well is, I'd say, approaches from what you call third-party referrers to, whether that be social prescribers, statutory, voluntary organisations interested in sheds. And I mean, that is, I think that's a good thing, but obviously there's a need for it to be, to be managed thoughtfully, as it were. I won't steal the thunder of, I think, the session that's coming, but it's, I mean, there is definitely an upswing. And the other thing I think as well that we're going to see is that the age level is coming down. I mean, I recently had a discussion with children's services, and it's not very often you have a discussion with children's service about men's sheds. They're perceived at other ends of the spectrum. But of course, there are now, for instance, there are single dads out there who have fairly empty days whilst the children are out at school and things like that. I have noticed that the average age of shedders is coming down a bit. And I mean, that's good. I think that's really to be encouraged. And I think we need to make sure as a movement, we're ready for, it's easy to be typecast as something for old men, which is not true anyway. But, I think what we're going to see is a younger cohort coming into sheds. And maybe the challenge for all of us is how do we welcome them, integrate them, make them feel that the shed is as much for them as it is for maybe some of our longer standing older members.
Yeah, and I think it's when the shed's available as well. So a lot of sheds are only open in the day when people would work, but then we're seeing other sheds that run sessions now in evenings. And Patrick's shed in Frome, Patrick's up next with the social prescribing and referral session. They have a young people's section as well, I believe. So, and I've seen it in Blue Shed in near Didcot, who was the 500th shed to open in the UK. They had young people in there, which was just fantastic to see. In fact, he was definitely under the age of 18, if not under the age of 15. But he was there with his dad, that was lovely to see. So we're going to wrap up now, I think, unless there's any other questions from anybody. We have 2 minutes to go. The next session will be introduced by Rachel. I'm not going to steal her thunder. But thank you very much, Johnny. Thank you, Robert.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
Thank you both.
And all the presentations from the week will be going online. We will be putting them on our YouTube channel, and we will also be putting links off our social media and our website for all of these as well. Sorry, Simi there is talking about marketing for younger people. Simi Bennett. Yes, and we agree. And so we try to change our collateral and our imagery on a regular basis to reflect sheds with younger people, with older people. We need to do that with people from different ethnic backgrounds, because if we're going to attract those groups into sheds and show them how welcoming sheds are, we need to actually put our money where our mouth is and our materials where our mouth is to do that. Any final words before we get kicked off, Rob?
Keep shedding.
Cool. And Johnny, anything from you, or you?
Yeah, I'd just say this is for all the difficulties we've gone through, this is a golden opportunity for sheds coming up. Even, things are not as difficult as you think, even things like funding. There is stuff out there. So go for it, because I think there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of help out there. It's a really good time to get into shedding.
Cool. Thank you, Johnny. And I look forward to coming over and seeing some sheds in your network as we start to open up.
I bought a shed, I took it home, and I erected it. I bought a shed, I took it home, I'd selected it. I bought a shed, I bought a shed, I bought a shed. I followed the instructions, studied all the plans, worked day and night to get it right with blisters on my hands. And when I put the roof on and finished off the floor, I knew inside my heart of hearts I'd be ignorant no more. I heard a note inside my shed, I suspected it. I felt a note inside my shed, I detected it. I was so scared of what he said that I rejected it. He said, forget about the tarot, the I Ching and the runes. Get down your garden centre on a Sunday afternoon. Go past the cafeteria, blast all the flower beds. If you're searching for enlightenment, get straight for the sheds. And so we lived inside our shed, and we respected it. I taught him, and he taught me, and we perfected it. And all because I bought a shed.